We are the Charleston County Republican Party, and we believe in inclusion for all. Family values, friendships, pursuing the American dream, freedom to pursue your passions, working together, supporting small businesses, more job opportunities, and we support our military. We believe in supporting our youth. And helping one another. We're proud of our history. And we believe in protecting the unborn. We are.
Good evening, and welcome to the candidate debate for the South Carolina 1st Congressional District, sponsored by the Charleston County Republican Party. My name is Maurice Washington. I am the chairman of the Charleston County Republican Party. I will serve as your moderator for this debate. Thank you for attending. Please turn off or silence electronic devices at this time. Thank you. Before we get into the ground rules, I was asked to reference something that I am absolutely confident that no one in this room have an interest in. The bar services will be open until 11 p.m. Having said that, here are the ground rules that the candidates were given before this debate. Each candidate will get a 2-minute opening and closing statement, the order of which was decided by random selection. The panelists, whom I will introduce momentarily, have been asked to provide the questions to ensure impartiality. There will be no questions from the audience. Each panelist, in turn, will ask a question to all or a candidate of their choice. Each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to respond to the question. We strongly discourage disparaging remarks in connection to any of our candidates. In the event that any candidate is mentioned during the response to a question of another candidate, the candidate mentioned will have 90 seconds to rebuttal. Our timekeeper is to my left, your right, Dr. Mark Hartley, the South Carolina State Executive Committeeman. He is seated here. And will raise a 30 seconds card to warn the speaker when 30 seconds remain, a 15-second card when 15 seconds remain, and a stop card when time is up. The speaker must immediately conclude his or her remarks. Time limits are closely followed to ensure fairness to all candidates. So, you know the format, you know the ground rules. Let's meet our panelists and our Republican candidate for the South Carolina Congressional District 1. First, the panelists. When this panelist was asked recently, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Our first panelist, when asked recently to share in a tribute to Area 2020 college graduates, she said, "Embrace your fears. Don't be afraid to be the first." If anyone would have told me at your age I was going to become the first female talk show host on the first FM news talk station in the entire country, I would have said, "You're nuts." And after an incredibly successful 23 years news, radio career, she's here with us as living proof tonight. The golden voice of talk radio, please welcome 94.3 WSC's Kelly Golden. Thank you, Kelly. Our next panelist is the host of the TMA Morning Show on 1250 WTMA. He is a 30-year broadcast veteran, 7-time South Carolina Broadcasters Association Award winner. He lives on Johns Island with his wife, Sheila, and their new puppy, Artie. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Charlie James. Our next panelist is a Charleston native, an Army veteran, longtime radio host with Cumulus Broadcasting, and current evening co-anchor of ABC News 4. Please welcome Tessa Spencer. Our final panelist is founder, interviewer, and executive producer of Quentin's Close-Up. If you're doing or have done anything of community value, chances are you've been interviewed by this panelist. Please welcome the founder, interviewer, and executive director of Quentin's Close-Up, Quentin Washington. Now, prior to the start of this debate, the candidate's order of speaking was determined by a drawing lot or a deck of cards. We will now have the opening statements of candidates, starting with candidate Chris Cox. 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. I'm pleased to be here. Many of you probably heard of me for the very first time back in 2013 during the government shutdown when they nicknamed me the Lawnmower Man, when I was cleaning the trash up and fortifying the boundaries of the open-air war memorials, which I stuck around and had a bill introduced as a citizen legislator, bipartisan. Then you may have heard of me on the Bikers for Trump. I'm the founder of Bikers for Trump, which is one of the biggest, most successful grassroots organizations in the country that has over 400,000 followers and hundreds of thousands of members, that works closely with Donald Trump's campaign on a weekly basis. I've been running for office now since July of last year, and it's been quite an experience. I'm looking forward to explaining to you the direction I'd like to take the Lowcountry this evening. I'm looking forward to sharing with you the relationships that I've gathered throughout my short political career. I have the personal phone number of the President of the United States. He returns my calls within a 23-hour period. My organization was able to swing several congressional and Senate races in the 2018 midterms. And I'm looking forward to sharing with you how I hope to leverage those relationships. The first thing I'll do when I get to Washington is land a position on the Infrastructure and Highway Committee so that I can leverage my relationships to bring that money back to the Lowcountry to fix those crumbling bridges and the raggedy roads. I will work diligently to help the President reinvent and resurrect this economy that's been crashing as a result of this virus. And I want to thank each and every one of you here. My mother and my sister over here, I want to thank them for coming. My father is home sick this evening and won't be able to make it. And I want God to bless each and every one of you, and I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Chris Cox. Our next person, candidate with a 2-minute opening statement is Nancy Mace.
Thank you so much. Good evening, y'all. I want to first start by thanking the Charleston County Republican Party for bringing us all together tonight. We have 14 days until the South Carolina Republican primary on June 9th, and I know we're all facing this crisis right now, but it means a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to everyone up here tonight that you took the time to be here either in person or online at home, and I thank you. I want to thank my children, Miles and Ellie, who are here tonight. They're in the back, for coming out and supporting Mom. Running for Congress is no small feat. It takes a lot of time. It's 7 days a week, often 24 hours a day, and they've been right there by my side. And I want to thank you, too, for being here tonight. I love you. If you had told me 25 years ago that I would be running for Congress, I would have said, you're nuts, Kelly. I would have said that. When I was 17, 25 years ago, I was a high school dropout. And one of my first jobs during this time was as a waitress at the Waffle House on College Park Road, exit 203 in Latson. I grew up here, and in that job, I learned the value of hard work. But it wasn't long until I became a high school graduate and eventually went on to college and became the first woman to graduate from the Citadel. And I did that 21 years ago. That also taught me the value of hard work. It gave me the confidence that I needed at the time, and it gave me the courage. It taught me courage to speak up, not just for myself, but for others. And I faced a challenge unlike any other in my life, where I had to face adversity day in and day out and be successful. What I learned is that life is a series of second chances. When you fail, you can pick yourself back up again, and you too can succeed. And that's the American dream, and that's why I'm running for office. I love what I do in the state legislature today, but I want to do more for the people and the family and the community that I grew up with. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Nancy Mace. We will now hear from candidate Brad Moe.
Thank you. If you were to ask me 2 years ago if I would be running for Congress, I would probably tell you no. 2 years ago, I didn't even think about this campaign. I was busy being the Housing and Neighborhood Services Administrator for the town of Bluffton. To make that even more real to you, I was busy helping people get home repairs, find affordable housing, helping single mothers who wanted to do more than just work their jobs, but they wanted to start a business. So I was helping them start businesses. So if you look at me, you're looking at someone that's got heart in the game. If you look at me, you would probably also say that I'm the outsider candidate. Outsider candidate only in the reason of being that I spent so much time being with you and your neighbors in this district and serving you, so I didn't take enough time to build DC relationships. But that's all right, because that's what I believe I was called to do, was to help the people in this district. I say to you that, I didn't try to seek out those DC endorsements. I even went on YouTube to try to look to see how to get an endorsement. That didn't work. But one of the main endorsements that I got, I'm a person of the heart and speak from the heart, and the work that I do is from the heart. One of the main endorsements I got, which I think is one of the most important, is a young lady. I walk into her office and I asked her if she would vote for me. She said, yes. She said, but Brad, she said, somebody told me a long time ago that my vote doesn't matter. And so to have her vote for me on June the 9th and to have you vote for me June the 9th will mean a lot, but especially her. I say to you to vote me for Congress because you'll be voting for someone who's got heart in the game, someone who knows and have worked with those in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Brad Moe. We will now hear from candidate Kathy Landing.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Landing. I'm a candidate for the 1st District of South Carolina to Congress. It is so exciting to think about the last 11 months out on the campaign trail, meeting thousands of voters all across our district. And the number one thing that they have said is we need to find the nominee who can beat Joe Cunningham in November. Tonight, I am going to demonstrate and reinforce what an independent poll said last week, which is that I am the strongest candidate to actually beat Joe and lead our party to victory November 3rd. What will it take to beat Joe Cunningham? Well, first of all, we need a nominee that people can trust. And in my 35 years as an investment advisor and financial planner, I've built a business based on being able to engender trust and gain clients' comfort in believing in me very quickly. Credibility is key with this, and what you see with me is what you get. You probably know my backstory, but in case you don't, I was orphaned at 13 and went to Duke University at the age of 16. And I've strived always to live a life that my parents could be proud of. I've proven this through my long-term commitment to a 36-year happy marriage to my husband, Joe, to raising our 2 children to successful adulthood, and through community service. Another thing is we need to know, does this person care? My good friend Senator Tim Scott often says, it's not as important, they won't care what you know unless people know what you care. People know that I care, and I have proven this over many times, and because of this, I have earned the respect and the endorsement of people like Senator Jim DeMint and Congressman Jim Jordan. And I am looking forward tonight to being able to share a lot more information with you on why I will be able to help us take our party to victory and with this nomination. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, candidate Kathy Landing. We begin the questions now, and we'll vary the order, starting with candidate Chris Cox. The first question will be asked by Charlie James.
Thank you. Chris, trillions of dollars have been spent for COVID-19 relief. Do you think the shutdown was premature? Did it go far enough, or did it go too far?
I certainly think it went too far. Thanks to our president's policies, we quickly had tests available. We've had masks available. He was able to convince auto dealerships and companies across the country to start developing these respirators that are needed across the country. Now that we see the need for them, I would like to hopefully resurrect the ideology of the greatest generation from World War II, where we start to bring these manufacturing jobs back not only to the country but to the low country. Right now there's an amazing opportunity to start making some of these medical supplies that are needed across the country. Right now we're counting on countries like China to produce these medicines that are there to help us heal from infections, insulin, and just everything from a bee sting kit. And we've got to bring that stuff home. We really don't know what's in it. I don't think they're our friends, and I think the president's on the right track of getting us back to business. We got to resurrect this economy that right now has been sinking. We've got to support him and bring in these jobs back, and I'll do my best to support him. I will stand on conservative principles every chance I get, and if you're looking for somebody that's going to push back against the left when they're giving us a hard time, that's me. If you're looking for someone who will defend the president up against things like collusion and impeachment, that's me. I am a one-man squad. I don't need 3 people around me, and I'm very outspoken. But I also know when to bend a knee and when to bow a head. I understand tenacity equally as much as I understand diplomacy, and I will exercise all of them, along with the relationships that I've gained in the House of Representatives, the Senate, and with the President of the United States. And I want to challenge each and every one of you, from my opponents to the media there, in many cases, fake media. I would like to challenge you to identify someone who's expanded the Republican Party more than I have in recent history, with the exception of Donald Trump. I've been asking people for many months to do it, and no one has yet.
Candidate Nancy Mace, would you like to also respond to the question? Please.
Got my timer going too. I can't see Dr. Hartley over there. The government spent too much. They did more than what we needed during this crisis, and they shut down our country for too long as well. And we're all seeing the result of that today were the projections for the COVID-19 tests and the infections were not nearly as great as what we were told when this first started. Fortunately for South Carolina, we had a head start on other states across the country, and we were able to social distance and flatten our curve much faster. And now we're able to reopen much faster. And I've put forth several pieces of policy on my website at nancymace.org on how we can restore our economy, restart the Low Country. Previous to COVID-19, the Low Country had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country at 1.86%. And now we have thousands upon thousands of people who are on unemployment, making more on unemployment than they were when they were employed, who no longer have jobs, and we've created a situation that's worse because of the government's intervention. And we need to reopen our businesses. Big businesses and retail were open during the crisis, but our small ones selling the same items were shut down. And so we have a real opportunity. One of the things I've been talking about is tax relief for small businesses. Post-Hugo in 1989, the IRS did a revenue procedure that allowed small businesses to write off their losses that year immediately following Hugo. The stimulus, while great in many respects, doesn't allow our small businesses to write off those losses until 2021 when it's too late, when many of them are already going to be permanently shut because they can't afford to take this hit. And so we've got to find a way to help our small businesses and not do corporate bailouts, and certainly not bail out the Ivy League schools that receive the PPP rather than the mom and pop stores that had deserved it during the stimulus. So thank you.
Brad Moore, would you like to respond to the question as well?
Yes. So just to answer that question, again, I believe the amount of money that's been spent, and then you also asked whether or not we should, whether we should go ahead and open up the businesses. What I've found out and what I've saw is that businesses and families are ready to get back to normal. Again, I know that we spent, $1 trillion, as you mentioned, or more, and we plan on spending more to help out the families and help everyone, help the country get back to where it needs to be. There are ways, of course, I believe that we can. I think right now it's not so much maybe the focus of the money spent, because we all want to make sure that small businesses, mid-sized businesses, as well as these mom and pop businesses who I've heard from quite a few of them who said that, Brad, we didn't know the whole process, or we didn't know exactly how to apply for a loan. So I think right now it's important to get these businesses and families back to work. Again, there are some ways I believe that we can cut spending, recoup that money back in some way. I think it's just taking myself as your congressman, along with other elected leaders, to say, you know what, if we're going to and on the forefront, if we're going to make sure that we're getting America back to work, on the back end, we need to go back to the table and make sure that we're cutting expenses, make sure that we're cutting spending so that we can recoup that money back. For example, there's been one way mentioned as far as maybe selling some federal land property in order to recoup some of the stimulus money back. So there's some ways. If you look at the Government Accountability Office, every year it lists ways in which we can cut spending, in which we can get that money back. So again, yes, I think it's important to get everyone back to work.
Thank you, candidate Brad Moe.
Just to be sure, can we have the question one more time? Sure. So that we get it.
Yes, certainly, as I take a drink of water.
Sorry, Charlie.
Trillions of dollars have already been spent on COVID-19 relief. Basically, we shut down our entire economy. Do you think the shutdown was premature? Did it go far enough, or did it go too far?
Great, okay. So right at the beginning of this, when we started hearing about this virus, and clients even were asking me, what is this going to mean? Is this going to hurt the stock market? And I said, well, we hope that we don't hear the P word, pandemic. And shortly after we started to hear that this might very well be a pandemic, we heard the president saying things like, we may have to limit the number of people in a business to 50. The moment I heard that, which the next day it went to 10 and the next day it went to 3, I immediately got on the phone with a fellow named Tommy Baker. A lot of you know him. I'm the Economic Development Chair for the town of Mount Pleasant, and the reason I called Tommy was twofold. One, because he is a successful businessman, and two, because he's the chairman of a local bank that happens to be headquartered in Mount Pleasant. And I gave him an idea, and he said, wow, that's genius. We need leadership like that. He said, can I share that when I get on my auto industry call this afternoon? And the idea was this. I'm really big on visuals so that things are just plain English. Picture George Bailey standing there in It's a Wonderful Life with $3,000 and saying, what is it going to take to get you through until the bank opens? And remember, the first guy, he wanted his $242. But after that, everybody else got it. They understood this money had to last, and it had to last until the bank opened. My idea was this. So I called Joe McEwen, my good friend in Senator Scott's office, and I said, Joe, can Senator Scott get the message to the president? Please tell everybody we're going to have to shut you down because we don't know what we're dealing with yet, but don't lay your people off. Now, had that idea been able to go into effect right away, it says 30 seconds. Had that idea been able to go into effect right away, we could have had employers being able to borrow money for just 2 weeks at a time, payroll, right? Go into the local bank, get what they need for 2 weeks, and then if they need it for another 2 weeks, maybe we wouldn't have had to go this long. But you know what the math was? 10 weeks, $20, 30 million people have been laid off. It's $240 billion. That's not even an eighth of what we spent in the first plan. And ladies and gentlemen, for a second, think about if nobody had been unemployed. Think about how we'd feel in our country right now. That's my answer. Go back to work safely.
Thank you. The next question will come from panelist Kelly Golden.
And the question will be for Nancy Mace, and starts with Nancy, and it will be for everyone. We have the option to ask everyone a question or a single candidate a question. I just wanted to remind everybody of that, and this will be for everyone to answer. And it actually plays very well off of, speaking of making dollars last, and your George Bailey reference. Social Security was designed during the Great Depression as a safety net. To be sure, we never again found seniors under bridges. That was common at the time. In the 2020 Social Security Trustees Report shows that the funds are going to run out in 2035. That was the same estimate last year. So my question to all of you, starting with Nancy, is how would you ensure Social Security remains solvent?
Thank you for your question, Kelly. Start my timer. If you look at some of the numbers, it's really staggering. This year, we're taking on $4 trillion deficit, $25 trillion in debt. Over the course of the next 30 years or so, both Social Security and Medicare are going to amount to about $82 trillion. And that's, you just can't move forward and with those kinds of numbers in front of us. And no family can operate under those conditions at all. I look at my generation, and I know that none of us think we're ever going to see the light of day and see Social Security when we get to retirement. The system is broken. It was created when the demographics were different back then. Today, we live a lot longer. We have fewer children. And even in the 80s, when Ronald Reagan was president, he increased the age from 65 to 67 for Social Security. I believe that people who have Social Security now or who are getting ready to retire, nothing should change. But for those of us that are my generation, or maybe the millennials behind me, there should be gradual increases in age over the decades to come in order to address Social Security. I think you have to gradually increase it over time, the age. I think you have to means test for the very wealthy as well going forward. But the biggest issue that I see with Social Security, with healthcare, Medicare, Medicaid, is that we need to really look at privatizing a lot of these retirement systems. It's your money, and being able to have private savings accounts and other methods to prepare for retirement, 401ks, be able to put more money away, and privatize it would be a lot better option for all of us going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
So to answer your question, Kelly, I do know that one of the things that I would like to do as congressman, and hopefully before then, is to make sure that the Social Security Trust Fund, as you mentioned, there's a board of 5 members on that board to cover the trust fund for Social Security and Medicare. Well, it's only been 3, and three of those positions are held by the head, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, and a couple other secretaries. 2 of those positions are public positions for people like yourself and I. Though that board has not had two of those members for the last 4 or 5 years. The president appointed 2, but then Senate have to confirm those 2. And so it's been about 4 or 5 years since the Senate has confirmed those 2 people. My thing is, being from local government, whenever there was an absence on the board, we try to fill that board as quick as possible, absence as quick as possible. Because we realize that when the public's looking at a board and they see a absence of someone that should be on that board for a long period of time, they start not to trust that board or the government and think that that board is not important. So I say to you that my goal is to make sure that that board is fully staffed with all 5 representatives, especially those 2 public representatives that need to be on there, to make sure they're looking out for our best interests. And again, so that's what I would like to do moving forward, to make sure that that board is fully staffed for the public, for public trust, and for us to really know in our minds that the government is looking out for our best interests.
So when I started in my career 35 years ago, we learned about Social Security because it's an extremely important part about planning for retirement, obviously. So I deal with this literally every day. And when Social Security was first created, there were approximately 56 workers for every 1 retiree. And the estimate was that by 2030, we'd have approximately 3 workers for every retiree. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're very close now already, ahead of time, to being closer to 2.5 workers for every retiree. So the way the system was set up was to create a Social Security trust fund where the money would go in there, be carefully, prudently invested, and be able to grow so that as we had more and more people retired versus those working, we could make up for the difference with this source of money that would create a pool to create income and so forth. Instead, that trust fund has been raided over and over and over and is more full of IOUs than it is with any money. So I believe one of the most important things we need to do in Congress is restore the Social Security Trust Fund to what it was supposed to be and make sure it is prudently and well invested so that it can create a tremendous amount of investment income to help pay for all those people who have worked so hard and put so much money back all these years. I would be open to people who are much younger. I can tell you for a fact, working with a lot of the grown children of clients, I have several families where I work with 3 generations. For those that are in their 30s and 40s, they often do not think they will even have Social Security by the time they get there. So I think perhaps someone who's under 50, we may be able to look at adjusting the ages a little bit. After all, people are living a lot longer, and I find that a lot of folks that retire at 60 or 62 often get a little bit bored and go back and start consulting or doing part-time work. But for the most part, the number one thing we need to do is restore the Social Security Trust Fund and never allow it to be raided again. Thank you.
Very much. Candidate Chris Cox.
Thank you. Has anybody here ever heard of the story of stealing from Peter to pay Paul? Peter would be the Republican, Paul would be the Democrat, okay? These social services and all these plans and these handouts and the idea that we're just going to pay your way, we're going to give it to you. You don't have to work for it. Don't worry about it. It's got to go. I've got a quick answer to this. We have to privatize Social Security, and then we'll be able to keep the greedy hands of the Democrats out of it, okay? But let me explain something to you, folks. The people and politicians have been campaigning on this issue along with the deficit and health care and a lot of other things. But you are naive if you think a freshman congressional candidate or a congressional member can go into the House of Representatives and fix things that senior members of Congress haven't been able to fix in 30 years. I want to hit the ground running. I want to tackle things like asylum reform to take the pressure off these points of entry and, yes, build that wall. I want to tackle things like fighting against the opioid abuse. I'd like to see a small police station and all of these state-of-the-art schools across the low country and the country. I want to help lower the cost of prescription medicines, okay? I want to do things that are affecting this country on a daily basis, okay? And now we have these senior members of Congress who are going to be wrestling with this back and forth and back and forth. We have to go and find policies that maybe didn't work as a result of the Democrats throwing us on their fighting and throwing pork on top of this thing. Okay? We have to mature into that role. And as a freshman congressional member, if we're going to make an influence, then we're going to have to tackle things that maybe they're not trying to tackle. And we're going to have to get in there and get our hands dirty and roll our sleeves up. Okay? I'm not afraid to get in there, and I'm not afraid to stand up to anyone as long as I'm standing on principle. And that principle will govern my train of thought. And my train of thought will dictate my dialogue and my diplomacy and my tenacity. And I will get the attention of these members. You know why? Because they're going to need me. And in many cases, I'm going to have the power of a senior congressional member. You know why?
Chris,
Time.
time.
All right. Sorry, folks.
The next question will come from panelists Tessa Spencer, Brad Moe, candidate.
And Mr. Moll, I promise you this was not planned in any way. This question will be for you specifically, and I would like for all of the candidates to please answer. The African American vote is often taken for granted. Case in point, the recent comments by Joe Biden. What are you doing as a Black Republican to actively reach out to communities of color? And is the African American vote important to you, and why?
Thank you. So again, yes, just to answer your question, the African American vote is important to me. Many have asked me on this campaign trail, unlike everyone else here on the stage, they asked me, say, where's your picture with Donald Trump? I said, I don't have one. But what I have been doing was pushing his policies. I say just as good as pushing a picture is even better, is just as good as pushing the policies or the things that he believes in. So that's what I push. And I also let them know that by me being a bridge builder for those, the African Americans who's kind of hearing those comments coming from Joe Biden and say, where do we go? Do we go, now, because now we think about leaving the Democratic Party, going to the Republican Party, but are they welcoming? Are they? And so I said, well, you know what, I would love to have a picture with Trump, but at this point, I'm trying to be a bridge builder on his behalf and on the behalf of the Republican Party and conservative movement to say, listen, I got to kind of stay in the back a bit in order to welcome those in who want to have a conversation. So just the other night on Facebook, I had someone reach out to me and say, Brad, I see that you're running Republican, and it was a Democrat. They said, well, make sure that you try to find some of them that got some heart. But what she was trying to say to me was, Brad, we're looking at coming over to the Republican Party, but we want to make sure that they're welcoming us. So my thing that I want to do is more than just beat Joe Cunningham. I think that if we just shooting to beat Joe Cunningham, we're shooting too low. I think we also should have on our minds, especially as people of the Low Country, to say, you know what, we're more than just about winning an election. We're about changing lives. We're about helping people to get to where they need to be here in the Low Country. And where a lot of these people in the Low Country need to be is with the Republican Party and conservative movement, but you're going to have someone like myself in place in order to help with the messaging. And so people ask me to say, Brian, well, why are you a Republican? And because I get all these questions coming to me. I put myself in those communities. In 2018, after Katie Aarons' loss, it was said that now it's time to reach beyond the base. I can do that.
Thank you for that question. So first of all, my life has been one of inclusiveness because I've always believed strongly in the strengths of all people. And one of the things that in this campaign I have seen, and I've called on several good friends, and I'll mention them in a minute, is that there has been a long history of the Democrats, I think in many, many ways, claiming and using people of color in a way that didn't in any way, shape, or form actually help them get ahead. And the bottom line here is that we have policies on the Republican side that actually speak to the heart of a lot of folks. For instance, life, being pro-life, being strongly pro-life. And isn't it sad and pitiful that we see a very strong push from the liberal left about funding Planned Parenthood. In fact, in our own state, we had to actually fight to the Supreme Court recently about this because a lot of these locations are right near or in poor neighborhoods. One of the most important things that I think people of color that I have talked to, met with, and that I know personally already want is the same things that everybody else wants. They want a great job, they want an opportunity, they want to be able to feed their family and grow for the future and have a brighter future. I've met with some wonderful business people as Economic Development Chair in Mount Pleasant. Craig and Tim and Pearl Askew, who are one of the largest landowners actually in Mount Pleasant and have a fabulous business. And I sat down with them early on and said, what is it that you need the most that maybe the town can assist with? And they gave me some great ideas, and we've kept in close touch. I became very close friends with John Wright, who I ran with for council. John and I stayed in touch, and he is the president of the African American Coalition. And we've talked many times about jobs, and there are two major projects I'm working hard to bring to Mount Pleasant that will bring jobs that don't necessarily require a four-year degree, but can actually be exciting and well paid. And so we need to simply reach out and treat people the way we would treat anybody else, make sure we give people an opportunity and a leg up, not a handout. Thank you.
Chris Cox.
Thank you, everybody. Many years ago, my father had a children's camp in McClellanville. It was for disadvantaged children. And there was one young man in there. My father ended up naming him Burger because he could eat more hamburger than anybody he's ever seen in his life. And so 2 days later, after the camp ended, this young man walked from North Charleston all the way to McClellanville, and he told my father that it was the safest place he had ever felt. Well, my father, we adopted him, and he's been my little brother ever since. And people are always often asking me, why don't you bring Kevin Griffin's his name, out on the campaign trail with you? And I tell him, because if I've got to bring my black brother on the campaign trail with me so you don't think that I'm a racist or a bigot, then you don't know me, then you can't read my voice, you can't read my actions. And a lot of things I lead by example. In my relationships in the African American, the black community, that is one of the examples I lead. Just this weekend, I invited ladies from the Brexit. And they have to stay neutral. They're not allowed to pick a candidate. I invited them to come out so that our videos would reflect and we would see the black community breaking bread with the white community, sipping wine with them. The Brexit is a black community that is exiting the Democratic Party because they've seen that nothing has been done for them. They also have the Jexit, the Jews that are exiting the Democratic Party because they can see they've done nothing for them. The Democrats are fortifying the boundaries for illegal immigrants. They want you to be able to vote by mail. They want you to be able to go to the polls without an ID. I will be standing up to them, folks. And as far in regards to the black community, you don't need to have a program because I know a lot of my black friends that plenty of them have four-year degrees. And your degree does not define you. It does not define the income that you're going to make, and it doesn't define the person that you're going to be and the impact that you're going to have in society. There's not a color in a man's skin. Our skeletons are all the same. We're all equal, and we're going to all work hard to boost the Republican Party and to put it end to some of these outrageous behaviors. Thank you.
Nancy Mace.
Thank you, and Tessa, that's an excellent question, and thank you for it. This is something that is very near and dear to my heart, having grown up here in Charleston, and seeing the disparity between rich and poor can literally be between black and white. And it's incumbent not just to all of us here on the stage tonight, but it's incumbent for all of us in the room here tonight as Republicans to do our part to reach out to those communities. Our conservative policy is the compassionate policy. If you saw in December of 2018, the president signed the First Step Act into law. We all see and understand that when you're in these communities, you see the disparities between the unfair racial outcomes in our criminal justice and our prison system. And that's what the First Step Act attempted to do, is bring some reforms to our prison systems at the federal level. Just last week, Governor Henry McMaster signed my own version, very similar to that had provisions that were similar to the First Step Act, into law last week, because as a Republican, I believe that criminal justice reform and prison reform should be a priority for us when we're looking at trying to help communities lift themselves up. School choice is another one of those. When children grow up in rural and urban communities and they don't have a good school to go to, school choice, one of our other conservative educational policies, provides them an opportunity to get a good education. South Carolina has a great charter school system, and we're adding to it almost every year. Again, those are choices that we can give opportunity to children who are in need and from African American communities. It's an issue that's I've been passionate about and have worked on. Thank you for the question.
The next question will come from panelist Quentin Washington, and the candidate that will respond first is Kathy Landing.
Kathy, Caitlin Bird of the Post and Courier wrote this, quote, Landing says she's the best candidate to win back the suburban moms Republicans lost. Question, how many suburban moms did the party lost over to the past 2 years, and what exactly do suburban moms need right now?
Great question, Quentin, thank you. So I don't have the exact number on the number of suburban moms. What I do know is that places like Mount Pleasant, which is, of course, the suburb of Charleston, is heavily suburban moms, a lot of families, a lot of young families, and a lot of that we lost. We got it, but we got a lot less than we could have. And we also lost, obviously, downtown Charleston. The most important thing, I think, is that we need a candidate who can reach out and actually bring together people of all different backgrounds. And I was chosen by a moderate group. And I was surprised. They chose me quite early in this campaign. And I said, why did you choose me so early? Because I'm pretty conservative, very conservative. And they said, well, we looked at all the candidates and their background, and you by far are the one that is going to be able to appeal to suburban families, because the number one thing they're looking for is security. They want safety for their family. They want financial security for the future. They want things like border security. They're very concerned about health care. And so we went through a training session related to that, and it was extremely helpful. I think the most important thing right now is we need someone who people can see, as I said earlier, as someone they can trust, someone they can believe in, and someone has the experience and background to actually be able to get things done. And by the way, earlier there was a comment about freshman Congress member can't go in and get things done alone, and that is certainly the case, 1 out of 435. But ladies and gentlemen, one of the important things is there is not a single financial planner in Congress today or investment advisor, and hasn't been for many, many years. And when you want financial security, do you want someone who actually knows how to do a budget and has been doing it for years and years for all different kinds of businesses and individuals? Or do you want people who just play games and talk about certain percentages and things of that nature? So I think when it comes to suburban moms and why I feel like I can do it, I'm a suburban mom myself, I believe that we can bring those people back, and we can bring back those voters we lost in 2018. Thank you.
Panelist Washington, was that a specific question for Kathy Landing only?
Yeah, I can go with that. Yes, sir.
Okay. So the next panelist who will start or ask the next question will be Kelly Golden.
So speaking of financial security, with the fair tax, you feed your family before you feed the government. So I'd like to know from all of you whether you support the fair tax and you will support H.R. 25, why and why not?
Chris Cox.
So H.R. 25, the fair tax, okay, that was a very good quote. She said you can feed your family before you feed the government. How, that really resonates with you, doesn't it? What about paying down your student loan? What about paying down your mortgage? I fundamentally believe that there's not many jobs the federal government can do better than the state. We need to take the power away from the federal government and put it in the hands of each and every state. Then, and only then, are we going to be able to start getting some things done, okay? I wanted to touch on something I was interrupted on earlier with the time. When I was mentioning that I will have the power, in some cases as senior members of Congress, I want to explain that, okay? If I'm able to pull this off and I get to the House of Representatives, the Bikers for Trump PAC will be dissolved. Now, as I walk through the halls of Congress, I'll have hundreds of thousands of political activists behind me that are representing the #1 grassroots and the fastest growing grassroots organization in the country. So as I walk into these offices and I'm asking for things that I need to deliver to the Low Country, they're going to be more inclined to give them to me because it's very possible that I have 4,000 to 6,000 members in their district with our hundreds of thousands of members all across the country, okay? No member of Congress can control a group like that, can steer a group like that. And I got that by working my butt off, and I held it together. And it's making an impact, a big impact. The president told me personally that we personally impacted his presidential election, and that I made more public relations in the 2016 campaign than anyone except his family. The Bikers for Trump did, and they're still across the board with countless things. And my thing I relished when I got on the liberal media was CNN. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Nancy Mace.
Right. So the question is on the fair tax, HR 25?
Yes.
Yes, I support the fair tax. I also support a flat tax. I support a consumption tax. I strongly supported President Trump's Tax Cuts and Jobs Act when that came through. What we know is that when the government cuts taxes for corporations and individuals and small businesses, people earn more money, more jobs are created, there's greater prosperity, and there's greater wealth. We saw that after Trump's tax cuts. In fact, just a few months ago before COVID, talking with many small business owners in the Low Country, one of them owns several fast food joints, and they were paying, after the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in the Low Country, as I mentioned earlier, we have 1.86% unemployment here, but they were paying their entry-level employees at a fast food restaurant $15 an hour. And we're going to increase it to $20 an hour so they could keep their employees employed, so they wouldn't leave and go to other jobs to make more money, that they could earn that income there because they were such good workers. And so when we see that happen, we see greater wealth and opportunity for everybody across the board. I support corporate tax cuts as well. Our corporate rate is 35%. I support going down to 21. But we need to see it across the board, not just for corporations, but small businesses, individuals, and families as well. In my time in business over the last 20 years, I've worked in a lot of different industries and met a lot of different people. But when the government, when you hear their stories and the struggles and the challenges that they're having right now today, when the government gets out of the way, they can earn a living, they can create jobs and opportunity for everyone.
Candidate Brad Moe.
Yes, to answer your question, Kelly, I do believe that we need to update the tax system on the successes of President Trump 2017 tax reform by making sure that those expiring provisions become permanent. I believe as much as possible that we need to do what we can to make sure that the American families and the businesses going forward in the aftermath of COVID-19 as we move forward to make sure that we are taxed as less as possible. I do know also that again, because I'm always looking out for the small businesses and those people who are wanting to start businesses, even with the online businesses now, those who do not, who have an online business, they can be taxed from another state even though they do not have a actual physical location in that state. So as much as possible, I think that we need to make sure that we're making it the best. We're giving everyone, especially businesses, but giving everyone the best foot forward in order that they may be able to recover from their businesses or recover from COVID-19 and their businesses may succeed and soar.
Candidate Kathy Landy.
So the fair tax concept is certainly one way we can go, and there are merits in it. There are also merits in flattening our tax code a little bit more. Let me take you back just a little bit. Again, as a financial planner, I've dealt with this very closely with businesses and individuals. And remember, one of the reasons I'm running for office is because of watching all these years bad policy coming out of Congress with people that almost seem like they really don't even understand how economics work. So for years, we had a situation where corporations were doing their best to be bought out by somebody over in Ireland or the UK because they had some of the lowest tax rates in the world, especially Ireland. It was like 12%. And then what was the Democrats at that time answer? Oh, well, let's penalize you because you're trying to evade taxes. Well, I kept saying, why don't they just lower our tax rate so that it's competitive with the rest of the world? Thank goodness for President Donald Trump, because he pushed that through. We got individual tax cuts and we got a corporate tax cut that went from 35 to 21, as has been mentioned. Now, here's the problem. We still have too many loopholes. We need to simplify this tax code even further. And while we're on it, we need a budget. We have not had a budget in almost 20 years actually negotiated and passed. We have not had a revenue problem for the last couple years. In fact, since the tax cut, we have actually had the highest revenues in our history. So we have plenty of money coming in until this COVID situation, but that's a separate issue. But we were still spending over $1.1 trillion in this year's budget before COVID came along. And so that said, we need to get a budget, we need to get it balanced, and we need to make sure that whatever we do with the tax code, we eliminate as many loopholes as possible and make it as fair and flat as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question will come from panelist Charlie James.
For Nancy?
For Nancy Mason.
All of the candidates are pretty close on policy, but you're all very different people. I want to know more about you as a person. The COVID-19 pandemic caught the world by surprise. It caught this nation by surprise, and we all look to our leaders for comfort and support. Where do you look to when you're faced with a situation that you've not encountered before?
Thank you, Charlie. This has been an enormous crisis that we're all facing. It's been unprecedented. I've never been through anything like this. It's far worse than any knob year I think anybody has ever had. And not just is it our economy, but initially it started with our health, and our being scared for our health and our welfare, and for our parents, for those who are older or those with underlying health conditions. Based on the way the media reported it, we thought we were all going to die, right, within a few weeks. And so that's scary. And as a mom, having two children and facing that with them together, and then the other side of it is the economics part of it and what you have to do. Through this crisis, I have leaned in on my family, on my children. We talk more. The silver lining in this for our family is that we have spent so much more time coming together, whether it's on Zoom calls or the occasional Low Country Boil, but the amount of time I've been able to spend homeschooling my children has been amazing. It's been enormous. Internet church has been a lot harder for us. It's been more of a challenge to do that. We like being in church every Sunday or every Saturday night and experiencing our faith with our friends and our family. But we've been turning to each other, we've been turning to our faith to get through this together. And I will tell you, too, as a state lawmaker, I've talked to more constituents in the last 8 weeks trying to help them solve their problems. I've also dived into my work. I literally sit on the phone 12 hours a day helping people solve their problems. And it's a lot of work, but we've all gotten through this together. In South Carolina, Low Country has done an excellent job coming together through our churches, through our families, our neighborhoods, and our communities.
Candidate Brad Moe.
I look to my community for times like these. I was speaking with someone the other day, and which was part of my community and doesn't happen to be any relation to me at all, and actually is not even the same race as I am. But what he and I we talked about is after you leave high school and become an adult, you start to realize that your family is more than just the person you connected to by blood. Your family becomes that person in your community that's there to live life with you. And so I say that even more now because of COVID-19, I believe that it simplified life for many of us, again, as it did me, to realize who my community is, those people that I can go to. I know my wife, she was one of our kids. She kind of threw her hands up as far as helping her with her schoolwork. So she called another young lady who had a daughter that was really good at homeschooling and said, bring your daughter on over and we'll do it together. But again, what's helped me and what I hope has helped many of us to get through the effects of COVID-19 is community. I heard T.D. Jakes say the other day, and he said that it took COVID-19 to bring us back to remember what it means to be simple again. And again, I think that just that community has helped me through COVID-19.
I think the number one thing or two that I turned to right away with the COVID-19 crisis was a combination of my family and my faith. First of all, my husband, Joe, like me, he is very well-read, except his tends to be a little bit more current periodicals. I tend to go back, and in this case, I was looking at scientific journals. A lot of people don't know I was pre-med in college, so I had a lot of courses related to microbiology and so forth, and studying the molecular structure to try to figure this thing out. Of course, I'm not solving those problems myself, but what I was able to do is understand a little better what the science behind this was, and I think that the important thing here was that our church, although we had to close the doors and we had internet services, I was able to reach out to people in our church. I was able to actually look into the Bible. A lot of people forget the Bible is a book of stories of thousands of years of people living and dying and fighting disease and conquering things. So you can get a lot of comfort and a lot of inspiration in how to solve your problems. But also, Joe and I both spent a lot of time reading the DHEC reports, following everything on our own. As a city council member, I was required and needed to be there for our community and had many extra meetings about this through Zoom and through other means, Microsoft meetings, in order to make sure that we were doing as much as we possibly could without being top-down, heavy-handed. Because ultimately it came down to, we didn't know what we were dealing with at first, but within a fairly short period of time, we saw some of the ways to deal with it without necessarily having to close things down. I think that the other thing is we did stay very close with our family. We did spend a lot more time with my son and daughter who live here in town, thank goodness, and calling my brother and sister and so forth. And so it is a tough thing we've been through, but I think we've all learned a lot, and I do believe we're going to be able to face the next crisis better. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chris Cox.
This is about the easiest question I've ever been posed. I turn to God. On a daily basis, I'll bend the knee and I'll bow a head. I pray that he will fine-tune my instinct. I pray that my words and actions will shine through me, that people will be able to see that I'm a Christian and that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. So, we should have had 3 debates by now, and we haven't had the opportunity to distinguish ourselves on a stage, and I'd like to pivot for a moment. There's more than knowing about numbers and the ability to lead others. In Mount Pleasant, they had $36 million in a surplus and something called the fund balance. It's now down to $6 million. Okay, this is a reserve fund, and these are pre-COVID numbers. So before this is all a lack of responsibility. So I would like to ask, and I have a lot of respect for Ms. Landing, if she was unable to influence a simple town council, explain to us how you're going to go to the House of Representatives and influence them on the floor.
Let me say, as the moderator, the control of the debate rests with the panelists. The fact that Kathy Landing's name has been referenced by candidate Chris Cox, she gets a 90-second response. Candidate Landing.
Okay. So the general fund at Mount Pleasant has been strong, and we do have a large balance, and we did not go from 36 to 6 million, so I'm not quite sure where those numbers come from. What I can tell you is this: we did not have to spend any money out of the general fund in order to be able to address COVID. We had a budget meeting, specific, an emergency budget meeting, to look at it, because obviously things like accommodations tax, since our hotels and restaurants had to be closed, and other things were going to be lower for these couple of months. And so we did take a look and actually did things like hold off on raises that were supposed to happen in July. We shifted a couple of projects, capital projects that were not urgent in time and would not be hurt much by being pushed back a bit. And we were actually able to reallocate funds so that we didn't have to cut any services to the members of the citizens of Mount Pleasant and did not have to touch our general fund. So I think maybe the misunderstanding here is that there's money in the general fund that is set aside with an idea in mind for something, but it's not spent. It's there. And we have a AAA rating, and I'm proud to say that in my almost 3 years on council, I have fought hard back many times against tax increases and fee in lieu of tax, and I've been able to not just be an obstructionist, but actually come up with other ways of paying for things. So I believe I have plenty of background and experience because of my other years of experience to go to Congress and help us get a budget. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. The next question will come from panelists Tesser, Spencer, and Bradmo. You're up.
Charleston's digital divide is stark. We've known this for a long time, but it has become a major issue within just the past 2 months, and children in rural areas have suffered and been unable to complete schoolwork. Is this a state or federal issue, and why?
So yes, you're exactly right. I'm from Hampton County originally, and you're right, and especially more towards many of us know Allendale County area is kind of one of the hardest hit areas in our state concerning poverty. But yes, it is that digital divide grows the further you get away from the center of the urban areas that we have here in South Carolina. And your question is, do I believe that's a state issue or a federal issue? To be honest with you, I believe that's a federal working with a state issue. My thing as congressman that I always said through my campaign is I believe that I'm the candidate that's going to walk laws all the way from D.C. down to the least person in the district to make sure that that program is working. And again, I think that if we just see it as just a state issue or a federal issue, then we're not holding each other accountable to make sure, in this case, that the children within this state and within this district have the internet services that they need in order to get homework done. I believe, of course, but it's with COVID-19, out of all the bad things it brought with it, I think it brought from the White House all the way to our houses, it brought out some of the issues that we need to address as a country. And again, I can say our houses, but I think as our families, we talked to each other and realized that, man, I didn't even know you were, what your favorite color was anymore, till now I had time to actually sit down and talk with you. So again, I just think this is just another issue I believe that we should address from a federal and state level. That they hold each other accountable because it's too important. Our children's education is too important, especially when you're in a district, in a growing district, to where they're our next leaders, where they're our next workers in this district. We need to make sure that now, as we pour it into them, that they have the best education and the best resources to make that happen.
Candidate Landon.
Well, thank you. So there's a couple things at play here. The first one is this is an issue of infrastructure in general, but let's start with the digital aspect. So they're talking about the possibility of an infrastructure plan. I really hope I'm up there to help with that when the time comes, because this is an example. When you have a lack of access to broadband or simply don't have the resources to be able to pay for it, and we have huge swaths of South Carolina and this country that do not have broadband. Just imagine that for most of us who take having the ability to go online and do things, purchase things, educationally related, for granted. So there are organizations, there's companies right now that actually benefit if you have broadband because you're able to do things online. And what do? You might think it's the ones like Google or Amazon or someone, but what about companies like MasterCard and Visa and American Express? If you buy something online, you're probably using a credit card. I bring this up because there are companies out there today that pay millions and millions of dollars to advertise and to market themselves. How much better would it be if we were to set up something for infrastructure, for instance, for inner city or rural areas, to bring broadband and have some sort of long-term lease or naming rights available? The company I happen to work with, Raymond James, It was said many years ago by a very bright man who helped start the company that one of the best investments he ever made was in the stadium down there, the cost of that, because over the many, many years, they were able to get a tremendous return. But another thing about COVID-19 that I want to bring up is the fact that we closed our schools for such a long period of time. We didn't know what we were dealing with in the first week or two, but in a very short period of time, we found out this was not something that children were getting, and by the way, we now know it's not something children are spreading either. And that said, it made life extremely difficult, especially for families that were underprivileged, because kids were used to getting meals at school and other things. We need to make sure we never close our schools again like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chris Cox.
Thank you. I think this falls under federalism. I think all the branches of government could help out in a situation like this when we're dealing with this in this digital age. These children in these rural communities certainly need it. Everybody could use it. And I want you to excuse me a minute, because like I mentioned earlier, we haven't had a lot of time for these debates. And I don't want anybody to confuse anything that I'm saying with being disparaging. These are questions that need to be answered, okay? And I want to ask another question. So I have before me a FEC document, and it was published on 4/20/20 is when I got it. It's about disbursements. And now, we elected Donald Trump because we saw him pushing back against the establishment. We saw him naming it to things like the swamp, and we said we were going to clean it out. And I don't want to send new members there that may fall into that narrative. So I'd like to ask Ms. Mace, here, this is a document that says that you worked there from 12/14, and you worked until 9/15/16. Your last paycheck was 90 days before the campaign ended, and it was for $2,500. And your commercials and in articles across the country suggest that you worked for the president up until the very end. And I think that is either, if it's not a lie, it's a gross exaggeration. I'd like you to answer the question, was it your idea to leave the campaign in August at the convention, or was it Donald Trump 16 Inc.'s idea to leave the campaign?
And before candidate Mace respond, I want to say again, the question is not a disparaging question. The fact that the candidate has mentioned another candidate's name allows that person to have a 90-second rebuttal plus a 2-minute response to the question itself.
In what order do you want me to respond? Yeah, I don't know how to respond to people who just make stuff up. I don't know how you defend something that's totally unfounded, not based in reality or based in fact. Anyone can go online to LinkedIn and look me up, and my resume is on there. I don't think I have edited it since I was elected to the South Carolina General Assembly on January 23rd, 2018. And so if you have any questions about what I've done or the work that I've done and who I've worked for, it's all right there. I made a promise that when I was elected to the General Assembly that I would be one of the most transparent lawmakers available, disclosing every source of my income, et cetera. And I've done that since being elected. I'm happy to talk about my record working for President Trump. I had an amazing time on his campaign. And in fact, I remember helping you when you were getting Bikers for Trump started. And I invited you to my home. I put yard signs together in my garage. I gave you T-shirts and bumper stickers. We had a great relationship, and I always felt that we had. So I don't understand. I made a pledge that I would not go negative. We all did on any of the candidates up here, and I'm going to keep my promise. Thank you.
The question was not answered. Their last paycheck received, according to the Federal Election Commission, was on September the 15th of 2016 for the month of August. I'm asking, did you step down from the campaign, or did you continue working with the campaign till the end, for the record?
This isn't the format of,
This,
right. This is my turn. I had 90 seconds, and then I had 2 minutes.
And you have 2 minutes to
Correct.
respond to the question from, was it
Yeah.
Tessa Spencer, I believe, Pamela
Yeah.
Spencer?
I have nothing to say to something that's completely made up. So back to the original question about the digital divide. You were saying about broadband in rural locations. I do believe in the idea of federalism. There's a quote that I'm reminded of that's something to the effect of the government closest to the people is a government that governs best, whether that's at the state or at the county or at the municipal level in towns and cities. And so this issue has been worked on at the state level, and I think states know best what to do in those communities, in the rural areas. COVID-19 was a perfect example of that issue, where we had children sent home when schools were shut down, and they had to install buses and other temporary locations to provide Wi-Fi. What COVID-19 has done, the silver lining, has exposed many of the issues that our communities, rural, urban, and otherwise, have faced, whether that's regulatory policy that gets in the way of being able to expand Wi-Fi and broadband, or the inequalities that are out there. Equality being everyone treated equal, but then the equity side of it, where these children don't have the resources to be able to be as successful as people who have access to the internet, who have broadband in more urban areas. And so with that, those are education issues, and those are issues that I believe that the state knows best what to do at that level. And it's another reason why I support school choice. When parents only have one choice, they have no choices. And so for families that are in communities where the schools are not as great as their neighboring counties or towns, they should have the option to send their child to a better school with better access. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy Mace. Before we go on to the next question, how are we on time? It's 8:15, so we're doing relatively well. The next question then will come from panelist Quentin Washington, and the question will be posed to candidate Kathy Landing.
Kathy, what is the quality of life in 1st Congressional District right now as you know it?
Well, pre-COVID, the quality of life was terrific. I mean, not for everybody, but for most. As has been said, the unemployment rate was very, very low, under 2%, and we were essentially becoming a global magnet. We were bringing headquarters here, many, many companies. I believe that we can be in that position again. So I think that there is a difference in the quality of life right now if you're still home from school and you're not getting your school lunch and breakfast, and you're not able to, and your children aren't able to go to school or a summer camp, and therefore it's harder for you to work. So it's very hard right now, and that's a difficult thing to address on its own. But in the 1st District in general, we do have a number of things so much in our favor. One, the natural beauty of this area. As many people know, we are all against offshore drilling, and we believe strongly in protecting our environment, so that's one of the things the Dems can't use against us this time. But the other thing is that we know that we had become such a magnet for people moving here that we were actually dealing with a lot of issues of overcrowding in traffic and so forth. So this is one of the reasons why I've worked very hard as Economic Development Chair to bring jobs to our side of the bridge. Mount Pleasant is now almost 92,000 people, which is hard to believe, and too many people, 25 to 28,000 a day, cross the bridge, which creates more pressure for everybody, including Charleston, North Charleston, and where they're going. So I think one of the most important things we can do to increase quality of life and improve it for everyone is to bring more jobs to places that are closer to where people live. 2 major projects I'm working hard on that we are bringing to Mount Pleasant are both going to bring great jobs and things that people will feel good about and increase income so that people can afford to live there better. And we're also working hard from an affordable housing viewpoint with a developer who is building something with his money, not risking taxpayer money. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Chris Cox, would you like to respond to the question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Folks, I'm not going to Washington, D.C. to make friends. I'm going there to make a difference because you guys are my friends, okay? And you need to see that there is a clear-cut leader in front of you that will go out and stand up for you. And before I make any suggestions like that, I do my homework and I make sure it's fact because I don't want to embarrass you or my family or my supporters. So I'm going to try this again. So right now, one of my opponents has commercials out there suggesting that Donald Trump is her biggest ally. The picture that's being used is over almost 4 years old, okay? Suggesting that they're allies. So what I would like to know, Nancy, is that you, when I was with you last time, you rattled through all of your endorsements, but you forgot to mention your last endorsement, which was on May 8th. It was from something and someone called the Americans for Prosperity. And if you haven't ever heard of it, it's headed up by the Koch brothers, folks. The Koch brothers who are anti-Trump. Let me read you an article that was out in the paper less than 10 days ago from the Washington Times. It says, I'm sorry, got another one. It says that the Koch Foundation pushes back against, is not a friend of Donald Trump. The Koch network is going to endorse Republicans as well as Democrats. Now, if you are the Trump supporter that you say you are, how in good faith can you accept money from the Koch brothers who continually push back against their president and stand against America First initiative?
Was there an original question somewhere?
Yes.
Okay, where did we start?
The original question came from panelist Quentin Washington. Would you like to repeat the question, please?
And who was the first question to? Who was that question to?
Oh, Kathy.
It was the Kathy.
Okay, what was,
Now
all right.
it's,
All right, so I'll do, what was the question?
Yeah, can you talk to me about how quality life is right now in the first congressional district?
All right, okay, so I'm not even gonna take 90 seconds. I'm really proud of the campaign that I've run so far. We have over 1,000 people who've signed up to volunteer. I've raised over $1.2 million in this race so far in the Republican primary. I think that might be a record for anyone running in a primary ever in the first congressional district. And it takes someone who's willing to do the work, willing and able to do the work necessary to win in November, not just on ideology and policy. Everybody up here has great ideas. But no one's going to work harder than I will. I have been endorsed by a number of people and organizations, starting with the National Club for Growth, Americans for Prosperity. I've been endorsed by the NRA. I've been endorsed by GOPAC, ViewPAC, EPAC, or Elevate PAC. I've been endorsed by Representative Elise Stefanik. I've been endorsed by Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Minority Whip Steve Scalise. I've been endorsed by Senator Mike Lee and Senator Rand Paul. And I'm very proud of the work that I've done because we lost this race in 2018 because we were divided and we had a divisive candidate. I am working to bring everybody together today, not in the general election, but now in the primary, which is why you're seeing me work hard to bring conservatives and leadership together, because this is one of the top races in the country. And if we don't nominate a candidate who's strong on policy and on fundraising and can take it to the Democrats in November, we are going to lose.
Thank you,
Again, my question was not answered for the record.
candidate Cox.
That's the format. So
The-
is it my
the-
turn to do the 2-minute quality
Yes,
of
ma'am.
life question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to set my timer. And so your quality of life in the Low Country was that was the question.
In the district.
In the
In
district.
the district, congressional district 1.
Okay, and that was the question, was the quality of life. Okay. Quentin, we've known each other for a very long time, and many of the faces in the room tonight, we've known each other for a very long time. And I grew up here. I'm from here. I'm the daughter of a retired school teacher and a retired Army general, and I love the Low Country. But over the last several decades, everything, so much has changed. The landscape, the number of people are here. When people come and visit in our tourism industry, they never want to leave. They love our oak trees. They love our beaches. As Governor McMaster said, we're lined with gold. And they're beautiful. And I have had so much opportunity here in the Low Country. Now more than ever, our country, our nation, our state, our Low Country, the first congressional district, needs leadership. We have an incumbent right now who is very reactive, not proactive, not policy-driven, no solutions. And I'm offering you tonight a candidate who has the policy and the solutions to get our Low Country back on track. Previous to this crisis, we had one of the lowest unemployment rates in the nation, with the average being around 3%. We had 1.86% unemployment. And we need a fiscal conservative, a strong fiscal conservative, who will not add another dime to our nation's deficit. And that is my pledge to you. I will not vote for a single bill that adds another dollar to the deficit. This year we're facing $4 trillion in deficit and $24 trillion in debt. I want my low country back. I want our jobs back. I want our communities back. I want my kids back in school. As much as I love homeschooling, they need their friends and their communities. And no one will work harder than I will to restore our economy and to restart our economic engine right here in South Carolina. Thank you.
Candidate Brad Moe.
Yes, sir. So I'm gonna try to do this in, I got 2 minutes? Because
Yes.
I want to say two things, and I'm one of those candidates as well that definitely say, because I don't even know how to be negative. But I do want to say a couple of things to candidate Mace, and then I also want to answer Quentin's question. First thing is, research shows in 2018, in the midterm elections, 80 of the most contested House races throughout the country, 41 of those candidates who raised the most money end up losing. So it doesn't matter about money, because it matters having the right candidate in place. And also, I'll say that again. Research shows in 2018, out of 80 of the most contested House races in the country, 41 of those candidates who raised more money than their opponent lost their election, because it's not about the money, it's about having the right candidate in place. Second thing is, I want to say to candidate Mace is, and this is kind of more of a just maybe taking a look at, I know you had your bill recently that was passed as far as making sure that women who are incarcerated with the SC, with South Carolina Department of Corrections, make sure that when they're pregnant, when they're having a baby, that they're not shackled. And I applaud that. I mean, I think that's noble, and that's something that needed to be done. But again, I'm the candidate. I'm the one who does not only go after symptoms, but go after the problems. So SCDC is underfunded. SCDC is understaffed. There were 21 inmates that that mentioned to the state newspaper last year in 2019 that they were not able to either offered a rehabilitation class, or they were not either able to go to their rehabilitation class, because you have to have a correctional officer that can escort you to the class and that can also stay at the class while you're there. So my thing is, instead of focusing on just making sure women are not being shackled while being pregnant and having a baby, but make sure that she doesn't have to keep coming back into the system because she did not have the correct rehabilitation classes.
Thank you, candidate Brad Moe. Again, candidate Nancy Mace's name was referenced, and candidate, would you like a 90-second rebuttal, or should we move on?
I sure would. That would be great.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Brad, and I appreciate you mentioning that bill. This race is not going to be easy. It's one of the top races in the country, but I appreciate your positive campaign that you put forth. You've been nothing but positive. You put your ideas out there. You put everything out on the line. Brad's, that is literally building bridges here as you're running for the 1st Congressional District, and I applaud the attitude that you've taken here throughout your entire campaign. It's to be, it gives me, I literally have goosebumps right now, because
Same about you, all of you.
I appreciate that. It takes folks from every corner of our county or country or cities to step up and say, I want to be in the arena. This is not easy, and Brad has 4 children and a beautiful, hardworking wife. That bill last week was a huge step forward. I was inspired by President Trump signing the First Step Act in December of 2018. And one of the provisions in there was that our federal prison system would prohibit the shackling of pregnant inmates during labor and delivery. I could not believe that the state of South Carolina, that this was still allowed. And so last year, I filed a bill to prohibit it, and the governor signed it into law last Thursday. It takes a lot of work to be nonpartisan and pass legislation at any level, and I've got the experience to do it. I've done it before, and I'm going to do it again. Thank you.
Do I still get time to answer Quentin's question? Do I still get time to answer the question about the quality of life? No?
I thought you had. I'm sorry.
I was
and
kind
you,
of
you subdivided
asking
your
some
time.
questions to candidate Mace, but just
That's-
right quick, I believe that the quality of life in this district, I grew up in Hampton County in the Low Country. It's a great place to live. People want to move here. People want to live here, and they do not want to leave. But I will say this, is that the quality of life is fading away in a bit for those who've been here, because they realize once they've gotten here and moved from New York and Chicago, whatever else, they're like, oh my goodness, the rent here is just about as much as where I came from. And so I think that me being the chairman of the Low Country Affordable Housing Coalition, my goal is to make sure that people, as much as possible, can live as close as possible to where they work here in this district. So they're not driving 2 and 3 hours away. I'm from Hampton County, where single parents get on the bus at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and don't get home till 9 o'clock at night. And then that just creates a cycle of poverty. So again, I would like to work, my goal as this congressman is to work with the White House newly created, the White House created a program to help. Is called the White House Council on Affordable Housing. And what that does is basically look at federal, state, and local level housing to make sure that there's no regulations in place that there should not be there that's driving up the cost of housing. So I say let's continue to push to have more affordable housing to make the quality of life here like it should be.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have time for two more questions. And the next question will come from panelists Charlie James and Chris Cox will be the first to respond.
Mr. Cox, this question is for you. You said earlier this evening that the people of Charleston haven't had a chance to get to know you. However, you've been asked 3 questions by the panelists this evening, and instead of answering them, you took the time to confront your opponents. Do you think this tactic is one that will work well in the general election against Joe Cunningham?
Folks, I'm up against the establishment and I'm up against big money. I've missed 3 opportunities to engage my opponents. These are very fair questions, and not one of the 2 questions I asked was answered. The first one, did you leave the campaign on your own or were you asked to leave? This is the fact right here, the FEC disbursement, okay? The second question was basically, are you proud of the endorsement from the Koch brothers? And let me read you what the Washington Times said one more time. The Koch network has not been supportive of President Trump, and its leadership has said it will be willing to support candidates from any party. Folks, was that a fair question? Listen, I've only got one opportunity maybe here to ask some of these questions. That's why I'm the guy for the job, because I'm not going to back down if I'm standing on principle and I've got documentation to handle it. So let me explain something to you. So that she mentioned earlier, the Club for Growth PAC. I've already spent $450,000 on her, okay? The establishment PAC. Okay, then they've already given her over $100,000 for her PAC. Now, if you go and you look, I've done my homework. If you look at the Club for Growth PAC and you look at the Americans for Prosperity PAC, they mirror each other, unlike any other 2 PACs in the country. Why? Because that is the Koch brothers. It's a smoking mirrors. It's a front. Because if you're not a Republican, if you're a Republican and don't like Donald Trump, you want the Americans for Prosperity behind you. It's your bragging right.
Chris, time.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gatekeeper, timekeeper. And thank you, candidate Cox. Candidate Mace, would you want to exercise a 90-second rebuttal? Otherwise, we will move to the next question, which will be asked by panelist Kelly Golden.
Sure, I don't think I'll take 90 seconds, but the Club for Growth has a very vigorous vetting process and interview process. They're probably the most fiscally conservative organization in the nation, and I'm proud to have their stamp of approval. They vetted my voting record. They went through every single vote and wanted to talk policy. And being a fiscal conservative myself, that is the greatest approval you can have. They supported Senator Jim DeMint when he ran. They supported great fiscal conservatives across South Carolina. They supported Tim Scott when he ran for Congress. And so, these are all great things for the Low Country, for South Carolina, because people are tired of the rhetoric and they want someone to actually get the job done. And looking at the economic issues, the plight that our country is facing right now, we're going to have to make some very tough decisions. We're going to have people who are strong on economic policy, who are fiscally conservative, so that we don't continue to increase our deficit and our debt the way that we're going right now. We're going to go off the abyss that Reagan spoke about when he was president. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a question somewhere here?
Sir,
So
that went.
this is not the format. I think.
Mr. Washington.
So-
Mr. Washington,
So I
that went against the
responded.
bylaws
Is it my
here.
turn for the question now?
I did
Because
not
that's
mention
the
her
Just-
format?
name. and you allowed her
Candidates,
to
please,
answer
just
the
one
question
sec.
without mentioning her name. Just say it.
The question, the last question from panelist
Was
Charlie
for-
James was specific to
Right,
candidate
and
Cox,
And
correct?
according to the bylaws, they answer a question if I bring up the name. I did never bring up her name, and you allowed her the stage to continue to go on when the bylaws said I didn't say her name. But I'm just saying the rules should apply to everybody, and that's what the problem is, folks. The rules don't apply to everybody, especially when the establishment gets their hands into you. Okay? And right now, the establishment has their hands into Nancy Mace. They're going to spend years to pay those
that's-
favors back.
Okay, this is
Candidate
not
unacceptable.
the format.
Thank you. Thank you, candidate Cox. We
But-
appreciate your time.
My name was just, I was going to say for the record, the Club for Growth has endorsed President Trump. This is, I would like us to stay on the format what we agreed to, if that's okay.
That's okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. So the next panelist, the question will come from Kelly Golden. And
believe we're on
candidate Mace, you're first, please.
So I know the debate questions, I shared my assignment with our listeners because they, of course, are voters in the first congressional. It's important for, of course, them to have a voice. So this is a listener-submitted question, and I really think everyone should be able to answer it. It is about endorsements. It's about playing a role, that plays a role in every election. It certainly has been interesting here tonight. The question is submitted by a 94.3 WSC listener, Dane, and he says, a favorable endorsement from someone who's already achieved a whole lot and who's loved by many can go a long way in winning an election. Dane's question to you is, if you were to go up to former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley's office tomorrow and ask for her endorsement, what one reason would you give her to do so? So just to sum it up, would our former governor and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley endorse you, and why?
Great question. And Ambassador Haley has been a great, literally, ambassador for South Carolina. South Carolina has turned out some really wonderful leaders, and now we're seeing her on the national stage. I am the hardest working candidate out here today. No one will work harder than I will to win this seat back. And that's what it's going to take in November. I announced in June of last summer, and in 9 months I raised almost $1.2 million, which is the equivalent to what our nominee raised in 2018 in both the primary and the general election combined. If you don't think it's going to take money to win this seat back, then think again, because the Democrat incumbent is sitting on about $2.6 million as of March 31st. And so it's going to take someone who's willing to roll up their sleeves and do the work and has the experience to do the work. Previous to COVID, we knocked on 25,000 doors, my campaign. Post-COVID, we've made over 200,000 phone calls to voters in the district. No one's working harder than I will to win this seat back. I have the right experience, both as a mom, as a businesswoman, as a state lawmaker, the right leadership. While I have a very conservative voting record, I work in a very nonpartisan way to get the job done. Too many people who run for office want to be someone rather than do something. And I've passed legislation. I've seen my legislation signed into law like last Thursday by the governor, and I'm proud of our campaign and the positive campaign that we're running. We have everything that it takes to win in November. Thank you.
Candidate Bradmo.
Good. So yes, first of all, I'm not quite sure if all of us, if everyone on this panel, if we walked up to Nikki Haley's office, would be welcomed. Second thing is, if I were to walk up to Nikki Haley's office, I would say to her, Nikki being from Bamberg, I'm next door from Hampton County, I would just explain to her that, listen, I grew up with some of the same low country values that you grew up with. I care about people just like you. I know me growing up I will say this to her, growing up a preacher's kid in Hampton County during the time when you only had one phone in the house on the wall, not just the preacher woke up, but the whole house woke up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning whenever my dad got that call that, hey, my mom just died, or my dad just died, or we just took so-and-so to the hospital. So it's hard to grow up in that type of atmosphere and not be affected by the hopes, dreams, and pains of people around you, and it sticks to you. And that's why I worked in some of the professional positions that I've worked in that's dealt with community development and with local government. Because a lot of those stories have stuck with me and drove me to the point to work to help everyone as much as I can here, specifically in this district. So what I would say to Nikki is, Nikki, listen, endorsements, they may mean something, they may not mean something. But you don't even have to get on TV and tell people that you endorse me. But if you say, well, Brad, keep going and keep moving forward in your campaign because I endorsed you, with the respect that I have for her, it would mean a lot to me, whether she make that public or not.
Right. Candidate Landing.
Well, it's interesting. I haven't spoken in quite a while here tonight, so I'm glad to have a chance. I was actually interviewed on Fox News not too long ago, and in that question, I got a little zinger unexpectedly that someone from the state Democratic Party, the chair of the party, was saying that since I was Nikki Haley's hand-picked candidate, and something about being a rubber stamp for she and Donald Trump's dangerous policies. I kind of chuckled a little, and they said, what do you think about that? And I said, well, it's a little bit pathetic because, good grief, I would be honored to have Nikki Haley's endorsement, but dangerous policies, come on. What we've seen from the Democrats has been so dangerous on every possible level. And so what I want to share something else about with is the more important issue, which is the fact that in our last election, when we lost this seat to Joe Cunningham, a lot of it was based on outside special interest money, DC money and other groups coming in here. And we heard about it and we knew about this. But what you may not know tonight is that over $1 million of out-of-state and Washington special interests are being spent right now to buy this primary election. $646,000 of itemized out-of-state donations in a certain candidate on the stage who I shall leave unnamed so we don't have to go back and forth so much unless it's required. $126,000 of Club for Growth donations funneled directly to that campaign. And $492,000 of Club for Growth independent expenditures, which, by the way, we just found out about yesterday, are starting tomorrow to put at least $220,000 in the next 2 weeks to disparage me and try to make me look like someone that has a record different than I have. People are trying to buy this campaign right now, and nobody can deny that. The facts speak for themselves. What you need is someone that is the principled, low-country insider. We're the people that we want. We don't want people to buy this election. We want you, the voters, to decide who is going to represent you and be the voice of the low country. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Landing. Yes, sir. Candidate Chris Cox.
Thank you, Kathy. I would ask her, I'd say, Governor, I'm up against the establishment. They're pouring money into this race, and they're trying to buy this seat, and these seats should not be prostituted for the person with the most money. If we look at Karen Handel, that won against Jon Ossoff, we had $30 million flooded in there from California. The Bikers for Trump showed up, we pushed her over the finish line, and the article went across the president's desk, he signed it and sent it to me. I'll explain to the governor, from what I understand, that I've been in the Oval Office more than 410 sitting congressional members right now. I'd explain to her that I have the relationships and the direct connections to hit the ground running, that I'll have the influence there as a result of a grassroots organization. I'd explain to her that I don't have to be Mr. Nice Guy. I can save that for the weekends, because you've got to have thick skin in Washington. The criticism has to roll off your back like a water off the back of a duck. This is not my favorite thing to do. I've not been looking forward to coming up here and having to ask these hard questions. But I have to pose these questions because, see, I worked in the top level of the Washington with the president in the campaign. I know these things because people approach me and tell me, and I got to share it with you. And the PAC that endorsed the president now, they were against Donald Trump in 2016, against him. But the conventional wisdom says that they won't make any more money to give other candidates if they continue to stand against our president. I stand with the president 100%, folks. And don't forget, I challenge you to identify someone who's expanded the Republican Party more than I have. If you're looking for somebody that's going to run forward, and I am without peer on this stage when it comes to the influence that I had in 2018, the influence that I had the presidential election in 2016, and the relationships that I've gained as a result of my organization pushing them forward. I'm a clear choice to go there, but regardless if you see that or not, whatever you decide is what I'll do, because I am a son of the Low Country, and I love all of you, and I'm going to do exactly what you want me to do, but please forgive me if you think I've been a little harsh tonight, but these were questions I really needed to get out.
Thank you, Candidate Cox. This, based on time, this brings us to our last question, and panelist Tessa Spencer will have the honor, and candidate Brad Moe will be first.
The ultimate goal, of course, for each one of you is to be the candidate to unseat Joe Cunningham. But I would say in Brad Moe style, giving props to Nancy Mace, what would you say Joe Cunningham has done right, wrong, and what could you do better to serve all?
Okay, honest answer. I'm not quite sure too much of what he's done right. I do know one of the things that I will say this: whenever he got Kiawah Island to give the money back, I looked at his Facebook page. There was like 500 comments of local business owners patting him on the back because he was able to get them to give the money back. That doesn't look good for us, but I mean, whether you consider that right or not, 500 people, probably plus more, consider that right here in this district. And then I got off on that tangent. So the rest of your question was basically just how can I?
What could you do better to serve all?
Good, and I'm glad you asked me that. And I'll go more into it into my last 2 minutes with you all as well, but to spend the rest of my time for this question to answer you. What I would do different is I will, one of the things that Joe has done was one of the things I'll do different is I'll be more honest. Again, early this year, I saw to where he was marching with those in our district in Charleston area with the Martin Luther King parade. And then a few days later, he was smiling because he received the endorsement of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. I don't think that those people he was marching with a few days earlier would quite agree with killing babies and abortion. So I would be more honest. I would definitely be more honest, and I would definitely be more accessible. I would be more real. I would be what I think many people want in Washington now is to be more human, and to be more low country, and to be more Southern, and to be more of a person that people can really connect with and feel like they can talk to and express their concerns about this district.
Thank you, Brad. Kathy.
Okay, so let's start with what Joe has done right. Joe is telegenic. He smiles well for the camera, and he shows up, and you can give him props for being in the right place at the right time to often get really good photo ops. He voted against the $15 minimum wage, federal minimum wage. And he voted recently, after I called him out on it, against the $3 trillion plan that would have been a disaster, the Pelosi money grab, I called it. Here's the thing about that, folks. He voted against these things because they were going to be dead on arrival anyway. And they had enough votes on the Democratic side to get what they needed so they could give him a pass so that he could continue this reputation that he supposedly has of being the most moderate or bipartisan. But our congressional report card, which we put out starting last July, thanks to my husband's idea and my campaign consultant's great graphics, has shown over and over again that Joe Cunningham votes 89% with Maxine Waters, 88% with Adam Schiff, 87% with Nancy Pelosi, and 85% with members of the squad. Plus, he voted for impeachment. And oh, by the way, when you ask him a question about something, and this is how I will be able to go up against Joe, when you ask him a question of any detail on things like the $15 minimum wage, he says, well, I couldn't go for 15. I could have gone for 12 or 13, but not 15. And I'm sitting here saying, oh my gosh, he doesn't even understand what the free market is or why these things should be left up to the businesses who are competing in those areas. So I think the number one thing I will be able to do better is that when I propose legislation, it will not be a feel-good thing to make it look good and make a nice photo op. It will be something that actually addresses the problem and solves the problem. And I will work together with my other people that I work with in Congress. I've already said openly I will align myself with the House Freedom Caucus because I believe they are the most principled, and we will work hard to make sure that we bring legislation that actually solves the problems facing the district and America. Thank you.
Candidate Chris Cox.
The only thing Joe Cunningham has done right was something he got lucky at, okay? That was landing a position on the committee for veterans. But then he turned his back on veterans. He had an opportunity to give veterans digital records, okay? They've been working with it for many years. They've been trying to get digitized records. Instead, he voted to give illegal immigrants digitized records over the men and women that fortify our boundaries, the ones who are going home and suffering with PTSD, symptoms from Agent Orange, okay? He hasn't stood up for the people that helped put him in office. He pulled the wool over everybody's eyes, polarizing offshore drilling, okay? There's no oil out there. There's enough for 5 days worth of folks. I uncovered that they have, in Oklahoma in 2014, they had twice as many earthquakes in Oklahoma as they did in California. The conventional wisdom is because of drilling and fracking. Well, I've got a solution for it. You know what? We got a big fault line coming right here through Charleston area. It will be exempt from drilling because we can't take things out of the ground that we can't put back in there, and we can't afford an earthquake, all right? I've come up with solutions. And by the same token, our president, and thanks to his policies, we are energy independent, okay? I've done my homework, folks. I'm not timid. I'm not a bully. I'm not one that's going to back down, and I'm one that's going to speak up. I'm going to speak up where no one does, and I'm going to speak up for the Low Country. And I hope that you'll see the value in the things I can do and bring to the Low Country. Not only my relationship with the president, because we're friends and he wants to help me, he'll be helping you. But I want you to see my relationship with you. And that I'm not going to the House of Representatives to get rich, famous, or for anything other than to serve the Low Country. I'm not motivated by money, folks. I'm motivated by making history. And I want to make history for you and for the Low Country because my heart's in this. I'll sleep on the sofa. I'll sleep in a tent. I'll hitchhike back and forth to the House of Representatives.
Time.
You cannot put anything behind me.
Thank you very much. Candidate Nancy Mace.
Thank you so much. Joe Cunningham is a great rank and file member of the Democratic Party. He does that really, really well, no matter what anybody else writes about him or what he wants you to believe on social media. He's a nice guy, but he's just not the right guy. And if you want to take, for instance, an example where he could do better, I like to look at his crowning achievement, the offshore drilling bill that he touts all the time. This bill, what he didn't disclose to people here in the 1st Congressional District, has absolutely zero chances of ever becoming law because it was so partisan. And he promised to be an independent voice, and we've lost that. We no longer have that. The 1st Congressional District has a long history of having independent fiscal conservatives representing us and even standing up against members of their own party, which he fails to do time and time again because every chance he gets, he gives his voting card to Nancy Pelosi. And in my candidacy, I have a record of being an independent conservative. I have stood up against the Republican Party, especially when they spend too much money, which is often. We need someone who's going to be a truly independent voice, and I offer that. One last thing while I have 30 seconds, I want to say that the Club for Growth, I'm proud of the endorsement. They are not a special interest. You can go onto the FEC website and see every single one of their donors. They have thousands of members that are fiscally conservative here in South Carolina. Their sole purpose their goal is to lower spending in Congress. We need more of that, not less. And what my opponent will not disclose to you tonight is that they sought out the Club for Growth endorsement. When they didn't get it, it's sour grapes and it's all politics.
Thank you, Nancy Mace. This ends the Q&A part of our program. We will now have closing remarks, starting with Kathy Landing, working our way back to candidate Chris Cox.
So to beat Joe, we need a nominee with great qualifications. We are interviewing for an extremely important job where we will be pulling the levers of critical decisions facing our country's financial future, our liberty, and our security. Do you want someone who will throw out a vacuous soundbite, or someone who actually knows what it means when the Federal Reserve has to resort to printing money to fund the $2 trillion of additional cost because we went into a crisis without a budget and without a rainy day fund? Are you confident if you have a representative who has no idea of the risk associated with China's One Belt, One Road initiative that actually puts them on a path for not only world domination of trade, potentially also to become the #1 superpower? We are not in a game here, and we need someone with the experience and background who can actually tackle these problems and can be prepared to face our enemies boldly and to keep them at bay. The third element in beating Cunningham, and I've talked about several this evening, is that we need a person who has broad appeal and can bring people together from all different parts of this district and with different backgrounds. It's one of the reasons we lost last time. While I really do believe that my pragmatic professional and my principled way of working and dealing with people will help us, I actually have had 23 local officials, people that live in the 1st District, just in the last week, step up to endorse me because they believe I am the one that actually can represent the voice of the Low Country. And not only that, 20+ members of Republican clubs last fall who also stood up for me. I am proud to be the Low Country's conservative for Congress and not someone who has been handpicked by special interests and DC big money. And that is what it is. And we need to make sure we do not allow DC money to come in and buy our congressional seat this time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, candidate Nancy Mace. We will now hear from candidate Brad Moe. I'm sorry, did I? We're going in reverse order. So, Kathy Landing, we appreciate your closing remarks. We will now hear from candidate Brad Moe.
So got everyone's attention here, social media, whatever platform that you're looking on. I'm asking for your vote. I'm also asking you to change your mind. My wife says all the time that a woman got a right to change her mind. Well, I say, okay, if I could take it a step further to say, can that be for men for this election too? Can men have the right to change their mind? You may have already chosen or felt like you was going with one of these other candidates here on the stage, but give yourself the right to even change your mind tonight. For myself and for me, for the Low Country, we cannot have another 2018 election. It was too close to call. It was a nail biter. We do not need nail biter elections in this district. I was listening to Rush Limbaugh this week as I was scanning through the radio stations. One of the things he said, and it stuck out to me. I was like, oh my goodness, Rush is right. That's what I've been trying to say this whole campaign is this. When you got the right candidate in place, you can have large voter turnout. When you got large voter turnout, because you got the candidate that's in place that can reach, that can hold the base, but also pull and reach out to independents, young people. I got people who never voted for Republicans. You 70 years old was saying, Brad, I'm voting for you for the first time for a Republican because I believe in you and your character and who you are. So if you got a candidate in place that can provide large voter turnout, what Rush was saying, he said, listen, he said, doesn't worry about who stays home, who doesn't stay home, and who's everybody get behind one candidate. As many of us are saying, we all need to get behind one candidate after the primaries. From what he's saying, and I agree with it, it doesn't matter. If you got the right candidate in place that can provide a large voter turnout and a large margin win in 2018. I've spoke with the Kathy Landing supporter this week. They're not voting for me. I think that he still say he's on the fence. But one of the things he said, he said if Kathy doesn't win, I'm not voting for Nancy if she's the so what I'm saying is we can't make people vote for someone, but we can vote for the right candidate that can provide large voter turnout to where all that doesn't matter, who stays home. Thank you.
Candidate Mace.
Thank you so much. When we started this journey last year, we all pledged that we would run positive campaigns, that we would not go negative on each other. And there are only two candidates up here tonight, myself and Brad Moll, who've kept to that pledge, and I want to commend you for keeping it above board. These kinds of tactics are deceptive, they're dishonest, and they're just like the people in DC that we're running against right now. We need less of that, not more. I'm going to share a story real quick before I close up. Last summer, I got a call from one of my constituents in my state house district. She's a mom. She has an adult daughter who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was lateral. It was lateral on one side, and the insurance company was not going to cover the bilateral procedure that she needed to get rid of all of the cancer because she had not had the test, the BRCA test or the genetic test for breast cancer, and so the insurance company was not going to cover her surgery. And the mother calls me frantically, screaming, angry, hurt, worried about the life of her daughter. And I said to her on the phone, "Ma'am, I cannot make any promises, but I want to make a phone call." I knew a guy at the insurance company. 3 hours later, they called me back, and they said, the medical team re-reviewed the file, and we're now going to cover her surgery 100%. This is what motivates me to run for office. It motivated me being in the State House of Representatives, and I love that job. But I want to do more for the people in my community. There's so much more that we need to be doing. I'm here. No one will work harder than I will. nancymace.org. The email is nmace@nancymace.org. My phone number is 843-580-MACE. Thank you.
Candidate Chris Cox.
Thank you, Ms. Landing, for being willing to have the courage to step up and to say things that others may not be willing to. You know, we got to stand on some principles here, folks, and I'm not going to bite my tongue for anybody, all right? I'm going to stand on the principles. I'm going to stand on fact. I'm going to stand on paperwork. And I fundamentally believe that this position is not a job. It's not a career. It's an opportunity to serve you, an opportunity to raise the bar and move the needle. I fundamentally believe this with all my heart. That's why I'm saying 3 and out. 3 out. I want to fight for term limits, folks. I want to fight for veterans. I believe it's incumbent that we all understand the value and the sacrifice of our servicemen and women. Not only just the active duty, but our veterans, who in many cases are having a hard time getting health care, that are homeless on the streets. We've got to stand up for the people who stood up for us. We've got to be there for law enforcement. We've got to give them the tools that they need. We've got to be able to give our intelligence agencies the information that they need so we can stand up against rogue nations like Iran. We got a lot of work to do. I'm not up here running a dirty campaign. I'm up here trying to get answers so that you can make the right decision in case you think now maybe you made the wrong decision after 2 very plain questions weren't answered. You do the math. You're the mathematician, not me. I'm just trying to bring it to light. And I want to thank you all for coming here, and I want to thank everybody at home. And I hope that you can see the value I got here. In regards to expanding the Republican Party, the relationships that I have in Washington, the open channel communication I have with President Trump, I am without peer on this stage. I'm ready to hit the ground running, if you say so. If it's for the people, if I'm here by the people, you can count on one thing. I'll be there for the veterans. I'll be there for law enforcement. I'll be there for the blue collar because I'm a common man. Like the common man, I'm not going to see anybody left behind. No family left behind. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. Chairman, Maurice, I have a question.
Yes.
I know this was wrap-up, but we had a reference made that was untrue, and I just wondered if I had an opportunity to rebut, or because it said there's only 2 people, and she specifically mentioned Brad and herself. Is there an opportunity to do that or no?
Opportunist.
I turn to my,
Not in the closing? Okay.
I'm sorry? It's closing. I'm sorry.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our debate. On behalf of the Charleston County Republican Party, I want to thank our candidates for their participation tonight and their willingness to run for this very important office. Great blessings to each of you. Let's give them a round of applause. I want to also thank our panelists. We appreciate the time that you have taken from your daily activities to prepare for this event. You were marvelous. Let's give them a round of applause. And of course, I want to thank you, our wonderful audience, for attending this evening and for joining us via live web stream. Special thanks to Russ Leach. I don't see him from this distance, but special thanks to Russ Leach. Special thanks to Joe Moulet, I see him in the back, to George Gagunis, and to Mark Hartley, Dr. Hartley, and all of our CCRP Executive Board. You guys were indeed the difference maker. I also want to thank the lovable Republican who put us on track at the opening of this debate by standing and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you so much. So remember to vote June 9th, and do take a friend with you. Good night.
We are the Charleston County Republican Party, and we believe in inclusion for all. Family values, friendships, pursuing the American dream, freedom to pursue your passions, working together, supporting small businesses, more job opportunities, and we support our military. We believe in supporting our youth. And helping one another. We're proud of our history. And we believe in protecting the unborn. We are